Welcome back to another Sculptober video. This time we are on day 4. The theme is prehistoric, and I am sculpting a Xavier Houssin concept of a nice cute little cave girl. I am Follygon. If you are new around here, click that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about digital sculpting, you guys can check out my link down below to my Gumroad. For this, I am just doing a bust because I only have a single day to work on all of these different prompts and try to create something fun. So just the head, essentially, for this one. I would love to do the full character. I really love Xavier's work, and maybe I can take this further in the future. Starting off with a sphere, I of course begin blocking out all the major shapes of the head. This one is a bit more simplified, a bit more in kind of the traditional anime style that you might see. So kind of a really large, a little bit awkward proportionally in my opinion, for the head, especially for the back of the skull. Then the eyes, or at least the cavity of the eyes that I have right now, is absolutely massive. I'm gonna have some big oval shaped eyes in there here soon. Then for the nose, a pretty simplistic shape that is a little bit higher up on the face than what you might traditionally expect. But that's the thing about style, right? There's a lot of different variations. I love to experiment with style. It doesn't always turn out the way that I want, but I'm very proud to be able to say that I can reproduce a ton of different styles in 3D. I find that to get away from that kind of same face syndrome, if you guys are familiar with the term, or just having all of your work kind of look very similar, to be able to get out of that zone, sometimes it's a little tough, and to do that sometimes, well, what I like to do is I like to just kind of completely shift gears and do something completely out of my wheelhouse. So I'll do, like most recently I did a realistic boar-like creature for a bust. Even before that, I did a cartoon-styled troll character, and then after I was done, I turned that into a more realistic version of itself. So those are a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, simply because I am more, or a lot more experienced, I should say, in sculpting stylized characters, and that's because it's what I enjoy doing. I do a lot more of that. Talking more about what's actually going on screen here, I am beginning to block out the location for the character's eyes. And like I said, they are pretty large. As you can see, we have in a neck and ears at this point, has some nice little placeholders. And for the eyes, essentially what I need to do for this kind of flat anime style, a lot of the time you'll see them just kind of painted on, which I think actually works pretty well, especially if you're going to manually paint the highlights for those. But what I do here is I inset that cavity. I use what is called a polygroup with Z-Remesher, if any of you are familiar with that, to essentially give me a nice clean edge loop around that area so that I can get some more clean geometry. Then I use that to deform and kind of shape up that area of the eye cavity a little bit more, insert a sphere, and then I begin squashing that to better fit within that area. So these eyes are absolutely massive inside of the head, and I have to squash them, not just to kind of fit the shape better, but also to keep them from kind of merging together inside of the head, which is a bit of an awkward issue for a couple different reasons, but also to keep them from going outside the head, which is always kind of a problem when you have something like this with ginormous eyes. The next step with those eyes is going to be creating a quick selection so that I can make some polygroups to be able to more easily paint those eyes in the future. I just use my selection mask here to insert that dark color as a placeholder, and then I'll go back and repaint those later. From here, I make a lot of little proportional tweaks, a lot of cleanup, making sure that things aren't feeling too awkward from any one specific view, and then I start getting in the rest of my parts and pieces, like the eyebrows, the eyelashes, and the beginning of the hair on the head. We're gonna be focusing on the hair here very soon. I had a lot of fun working on this hair. It was pretty crazy, and it was actually a little bit more complex than what I had time for today. So I am going to simplify that quite a bit in this sculpt. Some of you might not have even noticed, but I will talk about that more once it comes up. For the base blockout or main shape of the hair, typically what I do is I create a little bit of a mask on top of the head, and then I extract that geometry and create what I call, at least, a hair cap. And that hair cap acts kind of like a bald cap almost, where it just kind of sits on top of the head, and I use that as a base to begin sculpting the rest of my hair on top of that. So I give it a little bit of thickness, or actually in this case, I duplicate the hair to create two of them. One that has a little bit of a cutoff right around maybe the top of the eye line, right around there, essentially so that I can begin sculpting some more form on that top portion to better represent what is present in the concept that I'm working from. So I mentioned that I would be talking a lot about hair in this video. This is a very simple process to just quickly get some short hair on a character. For this part, it's really easy to do. You can just kind of follow what I did here, just extracting the geometry with a mask if you guys are familiar with the technique. I have a lot of other videos where I do very similar stuff, and now you can see me starting to get in at least the primary form or most basic shape for her ponytail, which is kind of offset to one side. For that, I just drop a sphere on there like I do with pretty much everything and begin pulling that out to shape it into kind of the main shapes that we see in the profile. I simplify this quite a bit, just kind of using some different brushes such as Move, Clay, and Pinch to just begin shaping it up into something a little bit more simplified. And then I use Z-Remesher at the lowest possible value to begin simplifying that form. For those that are not familiar with Z-Remesher or don't know the purpose used here, the basic idea is to lower the poly count as low as possible. This essentially makes it so that I can clean up the form more easily because I have less polygons. Then beginning to get some color on my surface, just giving the hair that basic orange color that we are going to see in the final hair, and then beginning to put on a basic skin tone and then use a little bit of a warmer color. I actually sampled the same color that was used in the hair to begin kind of brightening up some different parts of the face, similar to what is in the original Xavier artwork. Then the shorter portion of the hair was a little bit of a lighter color, so I filled that in and continued to work my way around the face, making different changes for paint, such as warming up different areas of the ear, as well as darkening the inset portion, and then moving on to the eyes to begin finally adding that paint or color in there that gives them a little bit more character. You may see from time to time that I toggle off the eyelashes that are kind of surrounding the eye, and you'll probably notice that it feels pretty awkward. Specifically now I'm working on inflating the area around the cheek to give that some more volume to feel a bit closer to what I was seeing in my reference. But I just wanted to point that out specifically because I notice when people are sculpting, they get to these kind of ruts where things feel a bit awkward, they feel a bit stuck, and often it's simply because you're essentially missing some of the final parts and pieces that you need to make that character complete. Sometimes I could just be adding in a splash of paint. So if I made those eyelashes a different color, they would probably feel pretty awkward there on the face. So filling in that black color really helps them to frame the eyes and make a bit more sense visually. This is especially important when you are working from something that's very graphic. So something that's in a more anime style, like what I'm working from right now. A lot of my time here was spent making very small, minor tweaks to very tiny things, and I cut a lot of that out because it's very boring to watch. I don't want you to sit here watching me adjust the shape of an eyelash by, you know, just moving vertices around very, very slightly for like a good 5 minutes. That does not sound like a lot of fun. But when you are working on simple shapes for stylized characters, that doesn't necessarily mean easy. Oftentimes it can mean even more time spent working on making those primary forms as close, as accurate, and as good as possible. And that was definitely the case here on this character, and because of that, I did have to simplify quite a bit, specifically in the hair. You'll see me go through and make some of those very minor, slight changes to the face here as I begin adjusting the eye direction so that I can work on that, make that feel a bit more closer to the final character. I've mentioned in previous Sculptober videos that because I only have a single day for these, if I am adding any asymmetry to my characters, it's going to be very minor, so just kind of looking off to the side, a slight tweak for the smile, kind of like an upturned lip or something like that. And then with this character specifically, having that ponytail off to one side kind of breaks symmetry quite a bit here, especially in the larger form for the silhouette. So that's very nice. Here are some of those changes to the shape of the mouth that I was mentioning. There was definitely some awkwardness with getting the volume to a nice place here with the nose and with the shape surrounding the lips, just because in an anime style head, a lot of the time you pretty much just have a simple line representing the form for a mouth, and trying to overcomplicate that can make you run into some different issues. Here I tried to keep the mouth quite simple, but tried to give it a little bit more form so that it made, you know, a bit more sense in 3D. But at the same time, after I did that, you know, I had to take a step back once I got to this stage and start kind of smoothing out and simplifying some of the form around there so that it didn't become too kind of bulgy. At one point, it kind of felt like they were making a, what's it called? Like a duck lip or duck face kind of thing. And I definitely didn't want that, so I had to kind of clean that up a little bit. All right, moving on to the hair. For this, I use the Curve Tube Snap Brush. I love this brush. I love curve brushes in general. I use the size modifier to essentially make it so that the curve goes from a thick portion to a very thin portion at the end. That's a nice quick technique for throwing in a bunch of curves to begin representing the form of the hair. I also duplicated any piece that I could to kind of add a bit more complexity to a few specific different areas, especially for those larger chunks. Those made a bit more sense to do it there. In some of the smaller pieces, it can look really repetitive, so you have to be a bit careful with how you kind of manage duplicating and reusing parts. So this hair does get, you know, pretty complex, but it is still not accurate to what is in the original artwork. And that is because I really just didn't have enough time to kind of get that absolutely perfect. If I was doing this for a client and I had more than a single day, I would obviously take a lot more time to get that as perfect, as close as humanly possible to, you know, pixel perfect accuracy in terms of silhouette information, and then translating that to 3D to make as much sense as possible there. Here, I had to kind of get the gist of what was going on there, which is not something that I typically enjoy doing. I like to get things as close or as accurate as I can, but because I'm very limited on time, good enough will have to do. I also really wanted to focus on this hair because I get asked all the time for me to create hair tutorials, but I create so many characters with so many different hairstyles, and there's so many different ways that you can tackle those hairstyles. I mean, there's really just a lot of variation when it comes to hair, so I try to talk about hair as much as I can when it comes up. I did some fur on the beast in one of my recent Sculptober videos for the prompt curse, so there's some more sculpting tips there if you guys are interested. Make sure you go back and check it out. And I have a ton of other videos where I sculpt hair and get to create a lot of different cool hairstyles. So check out my YouTube channel. There's a lot of different resources on there. I doubt you've watched all of them, so maybe go back, check out one you haven't seen. And of course, I'll be doing more hair and fur in the future. Always experimenting, always growing, and trying new techniques. So stick around if you're looking for more sculpting tips, or if maybe you're just more interested in watching the characters develop, which personally is kind of why I'm here, kind of my own channel, but it's what I enjoy the most for watching these kinds of things. When I'm watching other people's sculpting videos, or when I'm watching 2D art videos, I really enjoy just kind of getting to see the artist's decision making, kind of see how they tackle certain aspects, and I find that that's a really great way to learn. And it's just enjoyable to watch something kind of come together from absolutely nothing to a finished product. So at this point, I've started working on the different parts and accessories that are going to be in the character's hair, including the bone, this weird kind of yellow spiky fruit. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to be. And then this acorn piece, and then there are some earrings, which were a bit annoying to kind of get placed correctly and get them framed on the face, especially the earrings, but in particular the stuff that's in the hair as well was also a little frustrating, simply because I didn't have enough time to make it make sense in 3D. So I kind of just put them there so that they were kind of framed in the correct location, but they're not really attached to anything, they're not really integrated super well. A lot of the time on my channel when I'm talking about this kind of stuff, I will talk about how it's super important that you need to integrate things like earrings or if a character is holding something. And that is because it makes it a whole lot more believable. If you have something that's just kind of pressed up against another piece of geometry, it doesn't really make too much sense. It just kind of feels like it's floating there. And some of these aspects I think kind of feel like that, especially if you look at them from the profile. But from the front view, I was, relatively happy with how they turned out. So they'll have to do, especially since we're very limited on time here. The earrings, I used a pretty interesting technique for just getting a sharp cutoff between poly paint. I used the slice curve brush for those that are familiar, and then separated those meshes to essentially fill them in with a full color. With poly paint, it tends to blend between different polygons because it's technically vertex color. I don't need to get into the technical aspect of why, but if you want that really sharp cutoff, I recommend using the slice curve brush and then just filling in your full color onto that object by itself. A little bit of work here on the earrings to begin shaping them up a little bit more. These were pretty fun to make. They're not super complicated, and because they're kind of a small side piece or accessory, I knew I didn't need to put a ton of effort or time into them. I could focus a bit more on just kind of getting the general shape. I didn't need them to be super accurate. Sometimes, especially when you're working on something like this that's kind of just a daily piece or a sketch, you gotta be careful with your time. You gotta know where you wanna spend it. So for this character, I spent the majority of the time working on the face, and then whatever extra time I had, I used on all the accessories. The hair also took quite a bit of time, so I would say face and hair were probably the main things that I spent the kind of most, or majority of my time, I should say, on for this one. But that is pretty much going to do it for day 4 of Sculptober, so thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you're new around here, click that subscribe button. These types of videos are very different from what I normally do. I normally spend around 3 or 4 weeks working on one character, and then producing, a highly polished full character piece, and then a video breakdown of that. So if you're interested in that, check the links in the description for my 2D to 3D videos. And of course, if you want to learn more from me, there is gumroad.com/Follygon with all of my courses, brushes, materials, and a bunch of other goodies on there. That's gonna be it. Hope you guys enjoyed the sculpt, and I will see you tomorrow for day 5 of Sculptober.